Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining the September NECAFS webinar. Um, this is Elizabeth Newbold, and I'm the Center Administrator for NECAFS. And I just wanted to run through a few logistics, and then I'll turn it over to Amanda Kinchla, who had the idea for today's webinar, and she's also part of the project team for NECAFS. So this is meant to be really an open conversation today to encourage communication and collaboration among everybody throughout the region and participating in this webinar. So while we do have some presentations, we really want folks to feel comfortable asking questions and having offering your comments and thoughts on conferences that you've attended. We will have open question and discussion at the end, but if you do have a burning comment or question as we're going through, please feel free to join the conversation. You do have the capacity to mute and unmute yourself on your end, and I think most of you have figured that out and know how to do it. So please jump in at any time. And also, I just wanted to emphasize that we do record all of our webinars and we post them on the NECAFS website at the end. So if you're not able to attend, or you know of others who aren't able to attend but wanted to see a webinar, they are all posted and can be viewed there. And once Amanda starts going, I'll post the link into the chat box so everybody can see where they are. So as I mentioned, this was an idea of Amanda's to host this webinar today. And so I'll turn it over to her, and we'll get going with how I spent my summer vacation, highlights from food safety conferences.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So as Elizabeth mentioned, I'm Amanda Kinchla, and I'm the Extension Specialist in Food Safety here at UMass, and I'm one of the co-PIs with the NECAFS team. Before I begin the session, I do want to remind you all that if you're new to NECAFS, that we do have a listserv, and that's where we post a lot of different activities going on within NECAFS. And it's also a friendly reminder that our annual meeting will be held in January in Baltimore. And this is a great place for us to have an opportunity for the regional partners to connect in person to discuss all sorts of things related to NECAFS, training, education, outreach, trends, activities. So, and we're splitting out this year into two-day sessions with one focus with produce safety rule, as well as preventive controls, and then one group forum. So the details for that will be posted on our website. So bringing it back to today's webinar, I know that the title was kind of hokey, but I was the one that proposed this program, and the idea was that there's so many different types of food-related conferences across the region, nationally and even globally, that it tends to make it really challenging to attend all of them, between the costs and the logistics and the program focus, or more importantly, not knowing what the program focus was. And the summer theme kind of came about with most or many of the food science, food safety related conferences tend to fall in the summer. So that's kind of how it evolved. And I just thought it would be very useful to have a moment to have all the fellow NECAF affiliates share their perspective from attending these different conferences this summer as a way to share and kind of help baseline about the differences between these different types of conferences. So we'll talk briefly about the Center for Produce Safety Research Symposium, as well as the International Association of Food Protection annual meeting. And then there's also one for an ag-related agriculture and biological engineer conference. So just to echo one more thing that that Elizabeth had mentioned, is that we really hope today's program will be sharing information learned at past summer conferences. And while there's a few of us that will give our perspective of the conferences that we attended this summer, we really want to encourage all of those that are in today's session to share any learnings that you may have from attending the relevant conferences, whether it's from this summer or from conferences coming up or from the past. Again, thinking about how we can work regionally more strategically, understanding what types of spaces we should be working in, I think is very helpful. So with that in mind, of kind of orientating, this is not an exhaustive list, but to kind of start off of the produce safety, I guess, or some food safety conferences, excuse me, some food safety conferences that we are aware of that have happened this summer. One is the Center for Produce Safety, one is for International Association of Food Protection, and one is Institute of Food Technologists. So this isn't exhaustive, as I mentioned, but it highlights a few different things, and it's kind of, I guess I'll sidebar to think it's kind of funny that knowing what your perspective is. So for example, when Elizabeth and I were working on this program, I said, oh, I really love IAFP, the International Association for Food Protection. It's so small and oriented and focused. And Elizabeth said, what? What are you talking about? I thought it was gigantic. And I said, oh no, honey, it gets so much bigger at IFT. So we thought, oh, it's probably worth knowing the scale and capacity of these different types of conferences, which then further kind of fostered this conversation of being able to share these different types of forums for us to get additional information. So generally speaking, with CPS, which I'll talk about that context in a little bit, but CPS, the Center for Produce Safety, is a really small program funded by an entity through UC Davis, and the attendance is about 150 to 300 people. The cost of the registration is $525, and there's a strong sole focus on produce. Compared to IAFP, which has an attendance of about 3,600 people with a registration cost of about $750. But the theme is food safety, and it's a little bit broader spectrum. So you can have allergens, you can do toxins, you can do microbial contamination, and a whole host of things related specifically to food safety, but it's a little bit more general. And then probably the largest food related technical conference, or at least that I'm aware of, is one called IFT, the Institute of Food Technology, where the attendance on this one is about 23,000, and we pulled these from the websites, with a registration cost of about $770. And the theme with that one is food science. So that is even broader, so it brings in a bigger crowd and has a wider focus of technological interest, and it has food science, food chemistry, food processing, and some segments specific to produce, some with product development, and a whole host of other things. So I guess moving to the next slide, I'll talk briefly about the Center for Produce Safety. And as I mentioned before, this is an organization that is managed somehow through UC Davis, but it's a sponsored symposia, and that is funded by a variety of different entities. And you can see in the top right corner, I have a picture of PMA and GPS and Ecolab and a whole host of other produce related players that are affiliated with sponsoring this program. And for those that don't know, it's probably worth knowing too that they host a variety of different types of produce safety related research. And presently they just sent out the call for letters of intent that's due in November. So if you're interested in funding opportunities, you can look over on the website there. But the annual meeting is offered every June, and they flip-flop from East Coast to West Coast. So this year it was in Denver, Colorado. And the last time I went, it was at Wegmans in upstate New York. But it's been in Florida and California, Colorado, North Carolina. So again, just they try to be mindful of the East Coast, West Coast thing. And so, as I had mentioned, this forum of the three conferences I displayed earlier to kind of showcase that this is a smaller forum. The participants that are encouraged to be invited are a diverse platform of producers and processors of produce, academic researchers, buyers, and those that are affiliated with distribution and supply chain. And The program is 2 days, 2 full days, and your entry into the program also includes lunch, snacks, and a reception. So one thing that's really, I think, important to know is that you are in one conference room the whole day, or for your 2 forums. So you are all presented with the same information throughout the entire 2 days, and you're exposed to the same poster sessions, etc., compared to some of the other conferences where you get to kind of choose where you want to go in those forums. And so it's good, and there's limits to that in terms of if not everything is of your interest, there's nowhere else to go. But on the other hand, it's really refreshing to know that we're all been exposed to the same information, and there's always time to between these sessions to have moments for comments, questions, and clarity. So there's some value in that. The other thing that's interesting with CPS is that in other conferences that I've been to, you can either be invited or you can apply to present relevant work at the event. But in this particular forum, all the CPS material is only the research that is funded by CPS. And generally speaking, it's a lot of fundamental research with long-term application. So a couple examples are Michelle Daniluk presented work on looking at post-harvest wash conditions for mangoes. I realize that we're not a mango heavy climate, but just to kind of show the application of investigating different water treatments to wash mangoes with different sanitizers and other post-harvest handlings along the supply chain. Separate to that, there was Sam Nugent's work was looking at rapid detection methods for measuring agricultural water on farm. There's a woman named Anna Allende who's been looking at establishing standards for monitoring the washing of produce in actual food production or produce post-harvest facilities, and looking at the turbidity and organic load and sanitizer concentrations and that type of thing. The Martin Weidman's groups has a project going on. It's prediction of quality of surface water use for produce production. Let's see, Laura Strawn had presented some work on microbial transfer with different produce materials. So some examples of that, of what's the transfer look like when you use bare hands compared to rubber gloves, compared to cloth gloves, etc., and looking at how those types of surface materials can help or hinder microbial risk. And Trevor Suslow has a variety of different projects within the CPS group, but one example is looking at how to prioritize environmental zoning for cleaning and sanitizing. And so I won't go into all of the details about these things of each scientific showcase, but I think it was worth sharing the types or the scopes of work. And so, as I mentioned, this isn't exhaustive, but on the CPS website, it does have the different posters or a variety of different types of work cleanly summarized and presented on their website. One thing that's worth noting, in my opinion, is that a lot of this work is really exciting to see that it's going to start building the future to help with some of the concerns that we've all shared within the produce safety arena. But it's worth noting that many of these are not today ideas. You know, like there's a pipeline of things, but a lot of the stuff is still in progress. And one thing that's great about CPS is that it's all presented in one form that you can kind of see where those pieces lie together. But one other thing that they did talk about, and it's really interesting that in such a short period of time, we've had a dramatic change recently in water testing. So at the CPS symposia, Bonnie, the program director, and Trevor Suslow had announced that CPS actively created an agricultural water testing colloquium where they brought in industry partners and academic researchers to build a case or a case study justifying that the one water quality testing method that is put in the FSMA regulation is not adequate, or making a stronger case that there should be alternatives equally representative of monitoring the water. And so highlights of that were discussed at CPS. And I guess one thing that they were touting, and I think it's worth noting, is that the power of something like CPS, where you have a diverse platform of buyers, supply chain producers, processors, and researchers, you can build some sort of case for the industry. And I don't know if it was a cause and effect or by chance, but that report was then shared with the FDA, presumably somehow shortly after that. And for those that don't know, the FDA recently just sent a revision on the allowable methods used for agricultural water monitoring earlier this September. So I have a feeling that the CPS colloquium might have been an influence in making those decisions. So I think that that was kind of the biggest thing that I took away of, wow, there's some forums here to make a strong impact. One hope that I have personally for next year's conferences, the CPS forum is really exciting about the applicational research that they have. And there's different forums within the sessions where they do these like talk back sessions where farmers, producers, processors all talk about the value of CPS. But one wish list that I would have is that there would be a case study demonstrating where supply chain producers or even buyers have implemented some of the research findings from the CPS research. And I guess that's really self-serving in my for me, in regards of, from the extension perspective, seeing how others put into practice research is a really powerful tool for me to motivate behavioral change to our stakeholders. And so that was the one thing I had hoped that the future programs can have, is a little bit more on the actionable execution of some of the application research to the growers on how they did that on their own farms. So that's the CPS in a nutshell. Does anyone have any questions about CPS? No? Okay, well then let's move on to the next conference, which is IAFP, and Elizabeth, you're going to be is going to narrate her experience of her summer vacation.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. And Christina Sweet is also going to join me in this. So I will just start, and then Christina can add her thoughts as well after that. And what I find interesting is, so Amanda has been to several conferences and has a sort of a deeper knowledge and understanding of what goes on, and as you can see, it is a very thoughtful discussion of the conference. And this was my first time going to IAFP, and as she mentioned, she and I were talking about it, and I said, oh, I walked into the Tampa Convention Center, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a huge conference, because there was people everywhere. There were a huge registration tables with many people registering. They had all these wonderful giveaways that they gave you when you came in, a bag of rice, food, soda, a computer bag. I mean, it was really very professional, and a lot of obviously time and energy went into it. And so it's funny that Amanda said that from her perspective, it was a smaller conference, but for a first-time person, I thought that it was a very large conference, 3,600 people, and so it really was a very large and interesting mix of attendees that were there. As we mentioned in the beginning, it's a food safety conference, so it looks at both produce safety but also preventive controls. And so within those two worlds, there is a wide mix too of opportunities that you can go and listen to, and it goes from smaller sort of roundtable discussions all the way up to large presentations in a large ballroom conference room type thing. And it can be from industry or folks from academic and research world. And so as Amanda mentioned, you could go to any variety of actual presentations. You don't have to all go to the same one, and there's a large agenda that you can actually pick and choose what you want to listen to. And one of the things that I thought was sort of interesting is a lot of people jump in and out of different sessions, that they don't necessarily stay for the whole thing. They'll come and stay for 15 or 20 minutes and then move on to something else. So that's also an opportunity that folks took advantage of. One thing that I do want to mention is that it was even though it felt large, I thought that it was very approachable, and it was well organized. They had an app that they were heavily encouraging people to use, and it was great. You would download the app onto your phone, and it had all of the sessions outlined for you with a description and the folks who were presenting, and you could create your schedule that way and keep track of where you wanted to go. And it had listed all the ballrooms or the rooms that it was in, what time they started, and it would remind you and keep track of everything. And so it was really, you didn't have to constantly flip through a book, although they had a book, but there was an easy way to keep track of things. The other thing that was nice about the app is that folks would do polling through their session that they were doing, and they did it through the app. And so when you were in a session, people might say, oh, open up your app and we want to take a poll of the audience, and they would receive feedback that way through that resource that had been developed. So there was a lot of things that came out that was really helping the attendee to feel that it was easy to navigate and to get around. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that there was really quite extensive trade show and poster session. So, and that was going for most of the time. So anytime in between sessions or during a break, you could go up and look at the trade show or go and look at the poster sessions. And within that area, they also had unlimited snacks, ice cream, coffee, cookies. Anybody could go up and get all these snacks at the same time, and they were strategically placed within the trade show and within the poster session, which would enhance people spending time in those areas. And so it was really just well put together and well organized. And I'll let Christina talk about her thoughts on the conference.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. I thought it was a really valuable conference, and I got the sense that there will maybe be a greater number of participants from state produce safety programs in future years. I didn't run into a lot of other people as from other state governments, but I think that there was a lot of relevant programming relevant to the produce safety rule, and it kind of, even though it was a large conference, relatively large, I saw a lot of the same people because we were all in kind of the same sessions. One of the things that I thought was really valuable is they had a debate session format, and I only got to go to one of them, but I thought that that was a really great way to get people engaged and really thinking about produce safety, like they had, or not, and food safety in general. I mean, one of the debates was on, liability in foodborne illness, and it just like offered some really great perspectives that are a little bit out of the scope of what I tend to think about on a day-to-day basis. So I thought it was a really great conference. I don't know if I will attend again next year. I may try something different and go to CPS, for example, but I thought it was great to see some new research on food safety and produce safety that is happening from different universities around the country that are outside of the Northeast, especially. And I also thought the trade show was really interesting because there was an opportunity to see some presentations within the trade show that are related to food safety and that are things that I probably wouldn't have just been exposed to in my normal course of work.
Thanks. And to add to that too, I had wanted to mention that, like I mentioned, there was a really diverse representation of topics. And so you could go to a small panel or roundtable discussion, as I am showing pictured here. You'll see, there's Betsy and Chelsea Matson from the local food cooperative. And so you could go and see a discussion on a very small specific topic that might have to do with training or implementation with growers, or you could also go and listen to, let's say, the allergen expert from Nestle who was talking about the different approaches that they took in their plants across the world to address allergen cross-contamination and that sort of a thing. So it really was either very small scale or very large and global, and you could choose. I mean, you could really expose yourself to both, and I took advantage of that and learned quite a bit from sort of those very opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of what's going on across the world in food safety. And so for hopes for next year's conference, I think one thing, and Christina and I both agreed on this, was that there was a lot of information that came out of those individual roundtables and seminars, and research too. But how does that information that was presented get shared, with and between, we'll say specifically the regional centers? They do record and post everything on their website, so you could go and listen to them. But is there a way to make that more digestible and something that could be used more easily than just sitting and listening to all of those recorded seminars? So trying to think about something like that coming out of there. And then also, there's so many topics that are presented on. It would be great. They're actually doing a call right now for proposals for seminars and roundtables, which are due next week. But it would be great if they had some sort of first round so that folks who are proposing something might say, this is what I have in mind. And could there be a group that bounced that back and said, this was presented 2 years ago. Maybe let's try a different angle or expand that a little bit. We are interested in this topic, but we don't want to duplicate what we just did. So trying to build on what was previously presented instead of just repeating, so that folks who do go year after year receive new information or build on what had been previously presented. So that's all that I wanted to say about IAFP. I don't know if others on the call want to add any perspective that they might have.
Elizabeth, this is Amanda. I do want to share one other thing, and I think you guys brought great insight to the IAFP conference. One thing to also make note of, within IAFP, I'm going to throw another acronym in there. They have these things called PDGs. They stand for Professional Development Groups. And part of that is they meet the day before the actual program events or the day of the program. I think there's a cocktail reception, I think, on Sunday night at 5 or something. But prior to that, in the morning, afternoon, or late afternoon, these PDG groups that have very focused topics within food safety get in a room and start throwing out ideas of the future. And two things result from that PDG meeting usually. One is discussions of the trials and tribulations within food safety that aren't in this year's conference, and start to craft networks to build groups to think about the future programs. And then also some activities that can be helpful for future knowledge sharing. So for example, I'm in the HACCP Food Safety Risk Management PDG, and we discussed some of the concerns that we have about the supply chain verification preventive control. And so since then, I've been working with a couple of different committees to create a symposia to discuss some of that pitch. And then working within that PDG, we're trying to propose speakers and that type of stuff. And then in addition to that, I'm working with an independent food safety consultant and an analytical chemist to think about verification activities that using COAs as a tool for your preventive control, supply chain preventive control. So just giving examples about the PDG does two different things, and I think it can help kind of address some of the things with your wish list of knowing how to share between program ideas for it being either a roundtable, seminar, or technical session.
Thanks, Amanda. Anybody else want to comment for IAFP?
All right, should we turn it over to the next slide, which is Chris Callahan, who's going to talk about the annual international meeting of the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers. And I would just like to interject here that I love that this is a thing, and this is a beautiful. And I always tease Chris with his passion for engineering, and I just love that one. It's an important aspect of produce safety, and it sure as heck isn't mine. So I can't wait to hear more about this session and how it lends itself back into NECAFs. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Amanda. Yep. So I kind of have feet in multiple worlds, and many of you know me from the work in NECAFs and food safety, but I do a lot of other more general agricultural engineering type work as well. And so my professional society is ASABE, American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers. It's a really awesome professional society, and I've been a member of several over my career. And our annual meeting was in Spokane, Washington this year. The annual meeting is annual. It's international, and it kind of rotates around. Despite being international, it rotates only. The locations tend to be within the United States, but they kind of move it around every year. First time ever in Spokane. Pretty cool part of the world. And what you're seeing there in the pictures is one of the associated field trips for the conference was to the Grand Coulee Dam, which is pretty gosh darn impressive on several levels, and also pretty challenging in terms of social history in the United States. There was an amazing American Experience on PBS, all about the history of the Grand Coulee Dam as a project, its impact on Eastern Washington, and especially indigenous peoples in the area, and really highly recommend checking that out. The dam was amazing. We went on a hard hat tour inside, and so I wanted to be sure people knew what engineers do when they have fun. We go into big concrete structures and look at control panels, and then on the bottom right corner there's it's an inlaid floor, and the design on it is the inside control mechanism of a hydropower turbine to scale. So pretty kind of cool stuff there. Anyway, that has nothing to do with food safety. Can you get me to the next slide, Elizabeth? Thanks. So a little bit of background on ASABE. On the right-hand side are what are the technical committees of the organization. So it's a pretty structured organization, go figure. Ag engineering, ag and bioengineering they're really disciplines of disciplines within the engineering world. So other disciplines might be like mechanical engineering, civil engineering, environmental engineering. Within ag engineering, it really is a combination of many different disciplines. And so as a result, the technical committees are pretty widespread and sort of diverse within the engineering world. The point I wanted to make there is those technical committees operate on a yearly basis, and so there are activities within these technical committees going on all the time, not just at the annual meeting. But the annual meeting is broken down in technical tracks. There's something like 155 technical tracks over a 3-day period, but they're broken down, and they have those tracks are the responsibility of individual committees that meet year-round as well, virtually. And so the program for next year is already, in terms of the general track, already defined. It's defined at the prior annual meeting. And so it's the general track, and then they have a call for papers like any other conference for specific presentations. But you can kind of get a sense for just, the range of topics discussed at those 150 some odd technical sessions. It tends to draw something like 1,500 to 1,700 people from all around the world, 30 countries this past year. And these are, they are engineering folks, but it's a wide range of both specialty and role. So maybe government engineers, like NRCS engineers are a big group in this organization, and also a wide range of career points. So undergraduate students, graduate students, grizzled veterans, etc. So because it's a pretty diverse set of disciplines, that it touches on everything from like precision ag to water quality work to air emissions from swine farms to food safety. And so there are some papers being presented in these sessions that might be of interest to folks. And it's kind of interesting because I'm willing to bet that there's not a lot of crossover intentionally between some of the work being presented here and some of the work at like IAFP, despite the fact that they really are kind of focused on the same area. So Amanda mentioned some mention at maybe it was at CPS, some mention of advanced testing methods for pathogens, environmental testing methods for pathogens. I mean, a lot of that stuff gets presented here too, in a really early stage way. So it's typically somebody's PhD work, but it's sort of being presented as a conference paper here. And it's also kind of interesting because this is also, see that first paper listed, somebody was looking at the variability of E. coli in stream bottom sediments. And so there's this connection to the more natural world, the environment surrounding agriculture, and influences between the two. So there's a lot of, to me, interesting disciplinary crossover opportunities here. So that's just a sampling of some of the papers that were presented this year. There is a searchable PDF linked at the bottom there. I don't know, I can't easily get at that, I don't think, but maybe Elizabeth, if you could paste that in for folks. So there's, like I said, 155 technical sessions, somewhere between 6 and 12 papers at each one of those sessions. So there's a ton of information being shared. The other interesting thing is at this conference, almost all of the presentations, the 15-minute presentations, also have a paper submitted. It's a conference paper, so it's not a journal article. That's more short non-reviewed paper, but it has a lot more of the background on the topic than what anybody can possibly present in 15 minutes. And so those get posted on the ASABE as well. Anyway, that's what I had. Any thoughts, questions?
Chris, this is Amanda. So do you think, I think this is an interesting platform that I haven't really delved into, but since it's so engineering heavy, do you think non-engineers would benefit from attending this type of forum?
I think it'd be kind of a hard justification for someone. I mean, it's a $700 conference. The travel's not inexpensive, and I would say it's less than 10% of what's being presented in the technical tracks have really strong crossover or food safety content. And I'm happy to sort of cherry pick and present for this group, and I often share with individuals like, hey, did you know, Amanda, that someone was actually looking at, a nuclear powered brush washer? So So, you know, I don't know. If I weren't in the field, I'm not sure I'd be going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, but I guess that's one of the things that personally I was hoping to get out of this session today, of just seeing who goes to what and why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing I don't need to go to where'd you go? The W state. Washington.
Yeah.
I don't have to go to Washington if I know that you can take that covered and share those learnings to the Northeast. I think that's great. Thank you for sharing today.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks.
Does anyone have any questions for Chris regarding his summer vacation out there in Washington? All right, let's move on. Elizabeth, would you mind advancing the slide? Okay, so this is a working list of other conferences that we was Elizabeth and I, and it is by no means exhaustive. But again, bringing back the thought that today we're hoping to share conferences that we know of, to one, invite you all to explore and or be aware of, and in a moment I will warn you that I'm going to open it to the floor for others to share any of their experiences. But the ones that that we know of, there's the New England Fruit and Vegetable Conference in Manchester, New Hampshire. I believe that's about 600 or 700 participants that attend that session, and it's going to be in December. I'm actually I will be at that one as well. I think Chris is going to be in attendance, and I believe Heather Bryant is one of the chairs. In addition, and then what was that?
Heather, that's got to be more than 600 attendees, yeah?
Yeah, it's more like 15 or 1600.
Oh, great. Thank you for correcting me.
Primarily growers also.
Yes. So, I think it's worth noting, yeah, so about 1,500 to 1,800 and it's very produce centric.
It's very much aimed at farmers. Yeah, and it's New England wide, but also a lot of participation from New York State.
One thing that I think is worth noting, and I'm gonna, if Lisa McCaig is still on the line, just to kind of do a moment to compare and contrast. In my experience of attending both the New England Fruit and Vegetable Conference and CPS, the Center for Produce Safety, I think it's worth noting that they are two dramatically different focus points. And I find that the New England Fruit and Vegetable Conference tends to have a little bit more how to use this information now. It's a little bit closer in and transferable. And CPS tends to be a little bit more fundamental long-term research. And I think both are valuable, but worth noting that they have a different focus on what they're trying to share. And then, Lisa, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Would you say that that was about right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're really, yeah, I think the audiences are very, very different. And certainly the Veg and Fruit Conference is, yeah, it's very applied. The presenters are, you know, a lot of extension and a lot of growers and a lot of like, yeah, a lot of sharing current practices and on-farm trials and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't think of any really like basic research that's presented at that conference.
Okay. Thank you. Other ones that we know about is the Empire State Producers Expo out in Syracuse later this year in January. In March, in the Sturbridge area of Mass, there's the New England Harvest Conference. That tends to be a little bit more broad spectrum of value-added production and produce. Two that I put on there is the Natural Food Expo East, which is in Baltimore, and that's usually every September, and the Fancy Food Show, which is a specialty food association. And I put those on there thinking more about how can we as NECAFs better leverage the small and medium processors of the region, and perhaps attending those types of forums to see new audiences that we can serve that would help build a better capacity within NECAFs and also have us as a group understand better of the other facets within the food system, particularly those that lend themselves on the preventive control side. And then another one that I've gone to in the past is the farm to school and or the farm to institution program. Has anyone gone to either of those forums before? No.
I have
well,
not.
Okay, the focus on those ones tends to be, I don't know, trying to promote how and what can be done to promote points of access of local foods into schools and or institutions. And so you've got a lot of the food service and nutrition managers within the school side. You've got the producers attending. I've gone to speak more about the food safety components on both sides, and there's also some distribution groups that are there to try to help mitigate how to get your supply chains up and running. So that's kind of a different scope, but I felt like sharing some of those forums, and again, thinking about how NECAFs can broaden our capacity to the audiences at large. I thought that might be worth sharing.
Yeah, and Amanda, I'll jump in. Chris has posted 3 more into the chat box. And so, Chris, do you want to just quickly run through what you just posted?
Sure, I'm posting a 4th too. So Great Lakes Expo is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's one of the larger fruit and vegetable expos, and I'm planning to be there primarily to get a sense for some of the new equipment, post-harvest in particular, handling, wash, sorting equipment that is coming down the line. So that's one to keep in mind. MidAtlantic Fruit and Vegetable Conference, I believe Hershey, Pennsylvania, last bit of January, first bit of February, as well as another big one. NOFA, New York Winter Conference, is in Saratoga Springs, primarily focused on, these 3 are all focused primarily on grower audiences. So NOFA New York Winter Conference is in Saratoga Springs, New York, mid-January, as noted there. And then I was just about to post the NOFA Vermont Winter Conference, which is in Burlington, February 18th through the 20th, also a grower-focused conference.
Hey, Amanda and Elizabeth, this is Gretchen Wall from the Produce Safety Alliance. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, hi, Gretchen.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. I just wanted to add, we haven't officially announced it, but going back to what Amanda was talking about as a result of the CPS meeting, you know, FDA has come out with these announcements updating water testing and, you know, announcing proposed delay of some of those compliance dates for agricultural water. And one of the reasons why they are doing that is because they want to pursue getting some more information from growers and educators. So they have actually contacted us to do something very similar to what we did at the Soil Summit, to gather stakeholders and have conversations about what the remaining challenges are related to agricultural water. So we actually will be hosting a water summit, most likely going to be at the end of February, and we're not sure about the location. It's definitely not going to be in Geneva, because the FDA really didn't want to be up in Geneva in February. But we're going to try to pick a centralized location that's easy for a lot of folks to get to. And as soon as we have more information about that, we'll make sure that we send that on to you in case anybody on this group is interested in joining.
That's great. I remember some folks at UMass went to that Soil Summit and found it to be really worthwhile. So I think it would be a great forum for your group to take lead on some of those future programs.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated.
Thanks for doing that, Gretchen. That is great.
So for those other participants on the line, is there any other conferences or upcoming events that you'd like to share as a way for us to kind of learn other activities where NECAFs can play a role? No? Okay. I'm going to just ask one final question. Is there any questions from the audience regarding some of the topics that we discussed today? All right. Elizabeth, I just want to ask, do you have any administrative questions that we need to take task on within NECAFS?
No, nothing administrative. And so I'll just say too that this has been recorded and I will post it on the website. So if others wanted to see it and weren't able to that you know of, you can direct them to the website. Any other thoughts or final comments, Chris or Amanda?
NECAF's annual meeting, Amanda mentioned it early on, but it is, we have had some people join since the very start, January 24th, 25th in Baltimore.
Yes, and there will be more information coming soon, a couple weeks. So
that's right. We encourage all of you to come. All right, well, thank you all for your attention today. We hope you enjoyed today's NECAFS webinar, and we hope to see you at future programs.
Great topic, Amanda. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Everyone. Bye.